Hey everyone, Matthew Kadish here, author, evil genius, and monster hunter. Coming at you today with a video about the author of the Witcher series suing CD Projekt Red and why I think CD Projekt Red should pay up. Alright guys, so I'm going to try and make this a quicker video than my last marathon one. But there's a lot of stuff about this story that I feel I need to talk about, and not a lot of other people are talking about it as usual. So full disclosure, right up front, I want to say that I'm going to be playing devil's advocate, going against the popular opinion on this story, because I sympathize with Andrzej Sapkowski, the author of The Witcher, due to the fact that I'm in the same business as him. I'm a novelist, and I know the life of a novelist and the business of writing books and how difficult it can be. And so all of my opinions on this topic stem from me seeing myself in a position similar to his. So it's coming from a sympathy point of view as more opposed to a logical one, even though we're going to get into some logic bombs in this video. So yesterday I saw a video from The Quartering that talked about how the author of the Witcher series, Andrzej Sapkowski, is suing CD Projekt Red, the biggest video game developer in Poland, for $16 million in royalties on The Witcher games. And, The Quartering brought up some really good points, and I've since gone on to watch other videos on this topic from YongYea and Laymen Gaming. A lot of the guys that I tend to get my video game news from, I went and checked out their videos on this. And I just want to say up front that they make a lot of good points. From the average perspective, if you make a business arrangement between two entities, you tend to want to keep to that arrangement, even if it ends up not working out for one of those parties. And I think that CD Projekt Red, as a video game studio, has proven that not only do they produce quality games and they put in a lot of time and effort to make sure those games are of quality, but they also care about their customers and they care about gamers, and they've done a great deal of stuff to garner the goodwill of people in the gaming community. And so it makes sense that people would come out on the side of CD Projekt Red on this issue, simply because they're a great company and they've earned the loyalty of the people who've played their games. And I'm a big fan of CD Projekt Red as well. I like the Witcher games. I loved Gwent. I'm a big Gwent fan. And I'm looking forward to Cyberpunk. So with that said, I think that Andrzej Sapkowski has a point here in terms of asking CD Projekt Red to pony up $16 million. And I'm going to tell you why. So basically, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what being an author is like in terms of making a living. It's very hard to make a living as an author unless you're someone like Stephen King or James Patterson or those huge best-selling authors. Andrzej Sapkowski, he was a big author in Poland, but he's an old schooler. He came up during the time before ebooks and all this stuff, so all of his publishing deals are through traditional publishers. And he started off, just publishing locally in Poland under, I believe it was under, while Poland was still communist, but it might be that he started publishing after. I haven't really looked this up yet. But regardless, he started off just publishing his books in Poland. They became very popular enough that they got translated into other languages and eventually published in other countries, including the United States. However, the traditional publishing contract that most authors sign when they get picked up by a publisher, the way it works is authors usually get an upfront fee. So let's say that the publishing house paid him $15,000 for the first Witcher book. Okay, so that's what's called an advance. And that's what writers usually live off of while they're writing the next book, is the advance. Because basically, royalties on book sales are not paid until after the publishing company recoups the advance on a book. Okay, so I just pulled that $15,000 figure out of thin air. I don't know how much he received for the first Witcher book. It was probably far less than that. But regardless, he had to sell enough books so that the company that published his book made that money back before he starts seeing any royalties on those books. And the royalties on traditionally published books for authors usually range in the 10 to 15%. So for every dollar that the Witcher books earn in sales, he'll get, I don't know, maybe like 10 cents or 15 cents per sale. But that's after, all the markups and expenses and stuff like that. So, the royalties that authors earn on their books, unless you're a huge, big, best-selling author, aren't all that big, okay? So at the time, when CD Projekt Red approached Sapkowski about, optioning his books for video games, you have to kind of understand what the environment was like in Poland at the time. So basically, Poland, got freed from the Soviet bloc, and in 1994, I believe, they kind of reinstituted copyright law, and that offered some protection. But before then, there was no video game market in Poland. And when the guys who created CD Projekt Red started their business, what their business was importing games from other countries and converting them into like Polish language and stuff like that, and then distributing them in Poland. So it was a very small business at first. And there just weren't, Poland's a small country to begin with, but there just wasn't a huge video game market in Poland. And CD Projekt Red at a certain point decided, it might be better and more profitable to develop our own games and distribute those as opposed, distribute those worldwide as opposed to bringing in games from around the world and distributing them in Poland. So it's kind of like a shift in their business strategy. And one of the things that they decided to do was go after a very popular IP, at least in Poland, in order to give them kind of like a boost, because I believe they'd been working on Baldur's Gate or something like that beforehand, and that deal fell through. So they had all the, all the elements of making an RPG game, and they just needed a good IP to fit into those elements. And The Witcher just happened to be available at that time because the copyright law in Poland, no one had snatched up those rights yet. So from Sapkowski's point of view, when they approached him, they said, hey, you can either have a payout up front or take a royalty on the games. Number one, I get the sense that Sapkowski wasn't fully aware of the video game industry. And keep in mind, this was, I believe they approached him in 2002, 2003, something like that. So this was like, kind of early on in the prominence, the rise of video games. And Sapkowski, in addition to being an older guy who probably didn't know much about video games, I think he was under the impression that this was a local Polish studio who hadn't done much, and they were just planning to, get his IP to make a game just for the Polish audience. He wasn't aware of CD Projekt Red's strategy of, creating an English language game that they could distribute, worldwide, especially in the U.S. market. So he was looking at it from a different point of view. He was thinking like, oh, well, there's no video game market in Poland, so probably they're not going to sell a whole lot of these, and these guys have never made a video game before. So I'm going to do the safe thing. I'm going to take the upfront payout as opposed to agreeing to a smaller payout with royalties included in it. So I think a lot of people are under the mistaken impression as well that CD Projekt Red paid out a lot of money upfront for the rights to the Witcher series, which is not true. From my research, what I've been able to find is that CDPR paid an upfront sum of $9,500 equivalent US to Sapkowski for the rights to the Witcher series for video games. So slightly less than $10,000 off of an IP that has made tens of millions worldwide for this company. Now, a lot of people will probably say, hey, them's the breaks. You gambled against the company and you lost. Well, from a writer's point of view, money in the hand is always better than future money. And, I can totally see Sapkowski's, viewpoint on this, why he chose to take the upfront fee, because he didn't know, that CD Projekt Red was going to be going worldwide with this stuff. So he figured that he'd make less if he, went with the royalty payouts. So I can totally sympathize with his decision on this part. And this seems to be something that a lot of people are hammering on, is the fact that he gambled against CD Projekt Red. And you gotta understand, at the time, CD Projekt Red back then wasn't the CD Projekt Red that we know now. They hadn't actually released any games other than ports from other countries, and they'd never developed their own game before. So there was a lot of reason to believe that these guys weren't going to make a lot of money off this Witcher thing. So basically, my stance here is that I've seen this happen before, and it happens a lot in creative work, where creators get taken advantage of by companies and individuals that basically take advantage of their creativity and their hard work and make a ton of money off of it, and then leave the creator kind of in the dust. This is especially true of comic book artists. A good example of this is Bill Finger. So, let's talk about Bill Finger for a second as an example. Basically, Bill Finger was a comic book artist. He was under contract with DC Comics, and he was the one who basically created Batman. Like, he was the guy who came up with the iconic Batman that we all know and love. He even came up with a lot of the backstory. But because he was under contract, that allowed Bill Kane to kind of take all the credit for the creation of Batman, and DC and Bill Kane made a ton of money off of that character, and Bill Finger never got any credit for it whatsoever, at least until recently. And so, there's always been a very long history of creators being taken advantage of by companies and other individuals and things of that nature. And as a creator myself, as someone who writes books for a living and tells stories for a living, I know how much effort and time and thought and all this other stuff goes into the creation of these original stories and these characters and these worlds, especially when you're talking about science fiction and fantasy, where you're creating entire kingdoms, entire landscapes, and entire environments and stuff like that. So I really sympathize with Sapkowski on this, because without him, we would have never had the Witcher games. All this stuff that the Witcher games have in them were created by Sapkowski. All the characters, a lot of the situations, all the lands, all the worlds, all the political conflicts, stuff like that. Now, CD Projekt Red has their own very talented stable of writers, and they created a lot of stuff just among themselves. However, it was all based off of the groundwork that Sapkowski had laid. So without him, without his creative input on this stuff, we would have never gotten these amazing games that we did. So I think that to just discount Sapkowski's contribution to this, because he's kind of let's be honest here, he's kind of a jerk. He's kind of full of himself. But the whole idea here is that just because he's a jerk doesn't mean that he's not entitled to be paid for his work. And you can say, well, he got $9,500, them's the breaks. But at the same time, when somebody takes your work and turns it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, and they're continuing to use it to make millions upon millions of dollars, I do think that, at a certain point, a responsible company, has to look at that and say, you know what, maybe we owe this guy a little bit more than we gave him, because, it's just the right thing to do. Here recently in the U.S., Amazon came under fire because a lot of their factory workers or warehouse workers were earning less than minimum wage and had to subsist off of, food stamps and welfare in order to get by. And, a lot of people kind of expressed their outrage about that, because it wasn't fair. You had this multi-billion-dollar company making all the profits and making their employees work for slave labor. And so even though I am a capitalist and I'm an objectivist, and I do believe that corporations have certain fiduciary responsibilities to maximize their profit, at At the same time, you have to also consider the fact that there is a certain responsibility that companies have to the people that help them make that profit. You have to treat your employees well, and I think that too often creators just get trampled on. So in my opinion, it is not only morally right to make sure that someone like Sapkowski gets properly compensated for his contribution, but it also encourages other creators to work with those companies that reward them. So, I'm sure that CD Projekt Red's contract with the guy who created Cyberpunk is very much in his favor, and he might have had better lawyers, and it was negotiated in a more recent time, so it probably had better terms. But the point I'm trying to make here is that this isn't a cut and dry case of, hey, this is the law, get over it. You lose because you signed a contract that you didn't understand and you bet against a company that we love. This is a case of a creative artist getting screwed over because, let's face it, $9,500 in the face of tens of millions that CD Projekt Red has earned off of his creations. That's not quite fair, in my opinion. Now, you could argue that well, Matt, it doesn't matter. Life isn't fair. He signed an agreement legally. He's not owed anything. And I agree with you in principle. However, there are some other factors that we have to take into account here. So first of all, I don't know how many people know this, but in my research I found out that The Witcher 3 was subsidized by the Polish government to the tune of $7 million. So CD Projekt Red got $7 million from the government to make The Witcher 3 what it was. Now, if you're a capitalist, if you're someone who's defending this corporation's right to uphold its contract in terms of this creator dispute with Sapkowski, you have to realize that CD Projekt Red is essentially a socialist corporation in the sense that they were subsidized by the government, and that's taxpayer money, $7 million of money from Polish citizens that minimized their risk in developing The Witcher 3 and putting it out there, and they never paid that money back. They didn't give $7 million back to the Polish government to be redistributed amongst the Polish people. That was money that they put in their pockets because the government chose to support them. And keep in mind that tax, Andrzej Sapkowski's tax money was part of that $7 million. So this notion that this is a strictly capitalist equation here isn't quite true, right? Because if CD Projekt Red can take $7 million from the government and make tens of millions of dollars off of it and not have to pay it back, that kind of shows you their mentality when it comes to dealing with other creators, where they can take that creator's stuff and make a bunch of money off of it and never pay that back. Now, I'm not saying that they're wrong in doing so, because hey, companies got to make money, but I feel that if we take a look at it from a morally right perspective, that it's not unreasonable for Sapkowski to be asking to be compensated for this. Now, in the legal matters on this issue, where Sapkowski signed a contract, I read an article in Variety here where it talks about how there's some murky legalese going on here, which is one of the reasons why Sapkowski's lawyers feel comfortable in asking for royalties on these games. And that is, apparently the language in the initial licensing deal was murky enough so that it didn't explicitly state anything about the sequels or the DLCs. So even though Sapkowski got compensated $9,500 for the first Witcher game, whether or not CD Projekt Red, under Polish copyright law, had the right to continue to use these properties of Sapkowski for The Witcher 2 and The Witcher 3 and all related DLCs is in question. And this is what Sapkowski's lawyers feel gives them the right to come to CD Projekt Red and ask for royalties. And keep in mind, they're asking for a 6% royalty on the whole franchise. And I don't think that's an unreasonable thing, to say like, oh, $16 million, but they've made like hundreds of millions off of this stuff. And they've also been subsidized by the government, so, their risk was minimized, at least on The Witcher 3. So, we're talking about a lot of money here. And in addition to that, CD Projekt Red has Gwent, and collectible card games, online collectible card games, are just, basically an excuse to print money. I think Hearthstone makes something like $40 million a month just through card pack sales. And I know that I personally spent upwards of $2,000 on Gwent packs and stuff like that when I was doing the beta. So, Gwent is going to be a huge moneymaker for CD Projekt Red month to month. They owe the popularity of Gwent to Sapkowski's initial creation of The Witcher, because it's all based on The Witcher. So this notion that Sapkowski just wants to be fairly compensated for the use of his creations doesn't seem all that far-fetched to me. And the fact that there is a legal quandary, because keep in mind, this isn't about U.S. copyright law. This is about Polish copyright law, and whether or not the license that was granted in Poland was specific enough at the time to cover CD Projekt Red on this stuff. Now, also keep in mind, I know there's been some allegations thrown out there that Sapkowski's trying to blackmail or shake down CD Projekt Red for $16 million. But we don't know what kind of conversations have gone on before this lawsuit was filed. Basically, Sapkowski could have been approaching CD Projekt Red ever since The Witcher 3 hit it big and been asking them for more compensation or trying to work out some agreement, and CD Projekt Red could have been blowing him off. I mean, I don't know the details of this. I'm just saying we don't know what went on leading up to Sapkowski's lawyers contacting CD Projekt Red about this. So this idea that it's a shakedown, especially considering that that Sapkowski at least wanted to keep this private, I think that demonstrates that Sapkowski and his lawyers were trying to act in good faith and negotiate with this company. But I feel like CD Projekt Red made this public as a way to put pressure on Sapkowski to either back off or lower his asking price on this because of the bad publicity it would get. So just the fact that this was made public, I think, was kind of a crappy move on CD Projekt Red's part. However, even though it was a crappy move, it was probably a smart move, because it's probably going to pressure Sapkowski to lower his asking price on this sort of thing. But regardless, I think that at the end of the day, Sapkowski and CD Projekt Red are probably going to come to an amicable agreement, especially considering the fact that with the Netflix Witcher show kind of in the queue here, that's going to bump up the value of CD Projekt Red's license, and it's also going to bump up the value of the initial IP. So everyone's going to be coming out a winner here eventually. And I actually think it's in CD Projekt Red's best interest to keep Sapkowski happy and be able to retain their license on this very valuable and increasingly valuable intellectual property piece. But most of all, I just want everyone out there, whether or not you agree with CD Projekt Red and you side with them on this, or whether or not you agree with Sapkowski on this, which I think is probably the minority, please keep in mind the struggle of artists, the struggle of creators. I know that this is the non-logical part that I was talking about at the beginning of the video, because it's something that hits me personally due to the fact that I've struggled as a writer, as a creator, as an artist. I think every YouTuber out there knows how hard it is as a creator to not only be recognized for your efforts and the time and talent that goes into creating these videos, but also when Google smacks you down and demonetizes your stuff and makes it hard to earn a living. You feel that struggle, and that's the type of thing that Sapkowski has been dealing with for decades. And you can say, he's not a good guy, he's kind of a scumbag, he's kind of a jerk. You can also claim that he ripped off The Witcher from Michael Moorcock's Elric of Melbourne, whatever. I haven't read those books. I have seen Razor Fist videos on them, though. But you can say he plagiarized or what have you. But the fact is that, you can only plagiarize so much until you have to put stuff of your own in there. And I personally am not of the opinion that he plagiarized the Elric books from Moorcock. I think that there are some similarities there, but I've read the Witcher stories and they're pretty original. There are some tropes that are similar between those two series, but for the most part, I feel like Sapkowski's a very talented writer, and I've loved everything of his I've read so far. But long story short, support creators over corporations, just as a general rule of thumb, because these are people who, it's like winning the lottery to have a hit like The Witcher, where you can actually make millions of dollars and retire off of that and live a comfortable life after decades of toiling and struggle and working hard and not getting recognized for it or getting taken advantage of. So even though there is legitimacy to these arguments that CD Projekt Red is right to stand by their licensing deal here, just from a compassionate point of view, from the point of view of people who support artists and support creators and support their creations, whether you disagree with them or not. Like, for instance, I do not agree with George R.R. Martin's politics. However, I love his books. I feel like he is one of the most talented writers I've ever had the pleasure of reading. And so, I want to be able to support him in any way I can, even though I don't personally agree with a lot of his, private views on things. So, there needs to be like a certain amount of disconnection here where, we always want to make sure that the people who are creative and the creators and the people who are passionate about this stuff and bring this stuff into our lives are taken care of and well compensated for their work and their contributions. Now, I'm not saying that CD Projekt Red needs to be completely hosed over on this deal. I'm just saying that, I don't think it's unreasonable for them to pony up a little bit extra cash, at least more than $10,000 for this guy that they built an empire off of. All right, guys, so enough of my ramblings. I'm very sorry. This video is probably a mess because I had people ringing the doorbell and dogs barking and stuff like that. So I apologize for that. I'm still getting used to this new off-the-cuff video format type thing. But I'd love to hear what you have to say on this. I played devil's advocate in this video. I took the unpopular point of view simply because it's something that, I personally feel strongly about. I'd like to hear what you think about it. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know. Comment in the video. And if you like this video, please, share it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is you're on. And also follow me on Twitter. And let's have a discussion about, whether or not you think I'm right or wrong. Because I feel like this is an important topic to be broached, especially as video games become more and more popular and the distribution channels for authors become more decentralized, and independent publishing is starting to rise up. And so there's going to be a lot of questions of how people can acquire rights to things and how things get popular and stuff like that. Anyway, guys, this is Matt. I will catch you later.